This HOA Karen called the cops on me for breaking and entering into my own house. 7 days, 30 violations, and 1 weaponized bird feeder later, she thought she had me cornered. What she didn't know was, I spent 15 years teaching federal judges how to read the law, and today, class was in session. Comment below what country you're watching from. I moved into my new home thinking I'd bought peace and quiet. What I actually bought was a front row seat to the theater of suburban madness starring a woman named Melinda Crawley, HOA president, spiritual descendant of Napoleon, and part-time parking space prophet. On day 1, she introduced herself by slapping a violation notice on my door for mailbox angle discrepancy. On day 2, she cited me for potentially reflective doorknob energy, and by day 3 she escalated to what I can only describe as emotional racketeering, complete with clipboard, camera crew, and a monologue. "Sir, your lawn has been measured. It's hostile and non-compliant." And I thought she was kidding. I laughed. That was my mistake. Melinda doesn't joke. She issues ultimatums, wrapped in beige legalese and delivered with the cold efficiency of a malfunctioning vending machine. She said, "Your grass height suggests an intent to undermine community harmony." I said, "It suggests I own a rake." That's when she pulled out a laminated handbook titled Standards for Optimal Lawn Civility, waved it like scripture, and threatened to escalate the matter through municipal escalation. Yes, she said, escalation, twice, for emphasis. By day 5, I was up to 19 violations, including 1 for unregistered wind chime tone and another for visually ambitious shutters. On day 6, I caught her niece live streaming my recycling habits like it was a soap opera, and on day 7, I had the pleasure of being accused of breaking into the house I bought with my own money. Because apparently, according to Melinda, I didn't look like someone who belonged in a craftsman-style 2-story with excellent credit. She dialed 911 with the flair of a woman ordering her usual at Starbucks. "Yes, hello, there's a tall male acting suspiciously inside the home I don't recognize, but I feel very threatened by his door unlocking motions." That's when I stopped laughing. Because it stopped being funny, it became a matter of dignity, a matter of legality. And I don't lose legal battles to women who think color-coordinated petunias are constitutional doctrine. So I poured a cup of coffee, sat down with the HOA bylaws, and started preparing my reply. Not with rage, with precision. Next time we talk about the surveillance camera I found pointed at my bedroom and the HOA meeting where I flipped the whole neighborhood upside down. Like, comment, and stay in the loop, because this is just opening of Circle of Curiosity. I bought a house, but apparently that only granted me partial rights to oxygen and 0 rights to happiness. By day 7, the birds were under surveillance, and so was I. The first fine came at dawn. Not for noise, not for music, but for auditory bird. Misconduct between 6 o'clock, 6:15 a.m. I opened the notice half asleep, thinking it was a prank or possibly a fundraiser for lunatics. But no, Melinda Crawley had written it in red ink and highlighted the phrase, "excessive, joyful chirping at inappropriate decibel levels." Below that, she scribbled, "Sir, this is a community, not a rainforest." I stared at it, holding my coffee like a hostage, wondering if this was real life or a deleted episode of Twilight Zone Suburbia edition. It didn't stop there. Her niece, Tiffany, began filming me every morning with a 4-head-mount GoPro and 3 phones, like she was producing a documentary called Crimes of Lawn-Based Anarchy. Day 4, I was cited for aggressive trash bin posture. Day 5, a violation for recycling containers smirking in defiance. By day 6, I realized they weren't documenting code. They were documenting me, and not metaphorically, because that's when I looked up and saw it. A tiny, tan-painted surveillance camera, mounted across from my window, blinking like it knew my credit score. That blink raised a bigger question. Why was it pointed at my bedroom? I took a ladder out to the sidewalk, careful not to touch their sacred HOA lawn border, and began removing it. That's when Tiffany came screeching around the corner like an influencer with a police scanner. "He's tampering with community property," she shrieked, already live streaming. "The security camera is for neighborhood integrity." Behind her, Melinda arrived in her golf cart like it was the final scene of a very beige action movie. She shouted, "Step down immediately, sir. You are threatening our protective surveillance assets." Protective? It was zip-tied to a utility pole and powered by what looked like a portable phone charger. I asked her one question. "Why is this pointed at my bedroom window?" Her answer? "Because your drapes appear untrustworthy." So of course she called the police. And in a perfect performance worthy of regional dinner theater, she clutched her chest and told dispatch, "I fear for my safety. He's holding a metallic object and behaving menacingly near municipal hardware." That metallic object was a screwdriver. The officer showed up, clearly torn between responding and running. I calmly cited state law, pointed out the surveillance violation, and suggested they review the footage on Tiffany's stream. The officer raised an eyebrow, turned to Melinda, and said, "Ma'am, filming a private residence, especially a bedroom, is a crime." The air changed. Melinda blinked 3 times like someone just unplugged her soul and hissed, "This is harassment of leadership." And that's when I realized they weren't just annoying, they were illegal. And I wasn't just irritated, I was now interested, because when someone points a camera at your window and calls it community maintenance, you're not just dealing with a neighbor, you're dealing with a wannabe regime. And next time we enter their house of power, the HOA meeting. What do you think I brought with me? Spoiler, it wasn't muffins. Most people plant tomatoes. I apparently planted an insurgency. I thought I'd keep it simple. Heirloom cucumbers in raised beds, one of those calming grown man has a hobby situations. But apparently, in Charlene Crawley's HOA rulebook, vertical greenery is the first sign of civil disobedience. Day 1 of sprouting, I found a notice taped to the trellis. Section 11B, Suspicious Growth Patterns. Section 11B, Suspicious Growth Pattern. It included a poorly drawn diagram comparing my cucumbers to a surveillance antenna. I wish I were kidding. The footer said, "Issued under the authority of the Botanical Zoning Task Force," which, as far as I could tell, consisted of Charlene and her emotional support ruler. By day 3, she was back. Tiffany had the GoPro going, of course, and a TikTok title already loaded. Neighbor plants menace in backyard. Live! Charlene stomped across the lawn like a mall security guard with a grudge and announced, "Sir, your vertical vines appear to be encroaching on the visual airspace of Lot 72. I asked her if she wanted a cucumber. She clutched her pearls like I'd offered contraband. "This is not a farmer's market, it's a community," she bellowed. Then she added a new charge to the clipboard. "Intent to cultivate unapproved legumes." Cucumbers aren't legumes, but trying to explain that to Charlene was like trying to teach a raccoon calculus. Things took a nosedive when I picked up my garden hose. You'd have thought I was brandishing a medieval weapon. I'd barely untangled the nozzle when she screamed, "He's threatening me with a pressurized device!" She dropped to her knees, fake sobbing so loudly I half expected an orchestra swell. Tiffany whispered, "Keep filming, this is gold," and zoomed in on her aunt's face like she was auditioning for a hostage video. I stood there holding the hose like a dad trying to water begonias, and 2 minutes later the sheriff showed up with a clipboard of his own, only his said deputy instead of dictator. The sheriff took one look at me, one look at the GoPro brigade, and sighed like a man who regretted every career choice since traffic school. I showed him the garden. He scratched his head. "She called this in as an armed standoff with agricultural intent," he muttered. Charlene pointed at the trellis, still weeping, and shouted, "That man tried to intimidate me with a hose set to jet mode." The sheriff asked me if I'd threatened her. I said, "Only with zucchini if she keeps this up." He didn't laugh, but I swear his mustache twitched. He turned to Tiffany, still recording, and said, "You folks ever consider group therapy?" She didn't blink. That's when I knew. This wasn't about the garden. This was about control. Charlene wasn't just running an HOA. She was starring in her own internal soap opera, and I'd been cast as the villain without a script. So I changed tactics. From that moment on, I recorded everything. Every ridiculous notice, every word she uttered in all caps, every time Tiffany posted a video titled Community Menace Update Day 12. Because when someone thinks a cucumber is a threat, you better believe a flash drive becomes a weapon. If someone sees gardening as an act of rebellion, it's time to start composting receipts. Because HOA drama grows faster in manure, so what happens when HOA Karens meet constitutional law? Let's just say they're not ready for a man with a memory, a microphone, and a copy of the Texas Property Code. I once cross-examined a federal witness on wire fraud, but nothing prepared me for a woman defending the sanctity of beige. The HOA clubhouse had been transformed into what I can only describe as a courtroom designed by Pinterest and fear. Rows of folding chairs faced a podium wrapped in burlap ribbon, flanked by 2 fake ficus trees. A hand-painted banner read, "Emergency Public Discipline Session for the Good of the Neighborhood." I took my seat to the sound of murmuring residents and Tiffany adjusting a ring light with the seriousness of a news anchor at a breaking crime scene. Then Charlene strutted to the podium in a beige power suit, so severe it could have been sanctioned by NATO. She tapped the mic like a game show host and declared, "We are here to address the growing threat of tone-based rebellion." The charges against me? Undermining community order through facial expressions, suspicious lawn maintenance, and sarcastic hose posture. I blinked slowly, just once, and that alone earned a few gasps from the audience. Charlene listed my offenses like she was unveiling war crimes. He watered his lawn with intentional swagger. He smirked during a violation review, and he planted cucumbers without filing a botanical growth intent form. I asked if the HOA had a lawyer present. She responded, "Sir, I am the law." That's when I knew we weren't at a hearing. We were at a full-blown suburban coup. So I stood, walked calmly to the front, and began quoting. Not loudly, not with drama, just the quiet, pointed cadence of someone who had read the fine print. Your bylaws state that all landscaping violations require a 7-day notice and an opportunity to remedy. I received neither. A few heads turned. Your surveillance practices violate Texas Penal Code 21.15. Your fence color restrictions violate the Fair Housing Act, and your complaint about my facial expression, not a legal category in any state. The room shifted. Eyes narrowed, not at me, but at her. One woman in the back whispered, "Wait, that's real law?" I smiled. I hadn't even opened my folder yet. Charlene's lips tightened like a vacuum-sealed casserole. She tried to pivot. "He's a federal mole, planted to undermine neighborhood order." That earned some chuckles. She doubled down. "I am now invoking Clause 9.1, Extreme HOA Override." I paused. "Ma'am, that clause doesn't exist." She blinked. "It does now." At that moment, a man near the back muttered, "Did she just invent martial law over cucumbers?" The tension cracked. People laughed. Someone clapped. Then more joined in. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider. I was the guy reminding them they weren't hostages. They just forgot they could leave. That's when I realized something important. Power doesn't need a podium. It needs precision. Real authority doesn't scream in beige and invent clauses. It quotes code and hands over receipts. If someone wields power like a garden rake, all it takes is one flashlight and a rulebook to trip them in the dark. And Charlene? She wasn't the law. She was just loud. Can HOA presidents lose control? Let's just say hers is about to unravel like a clearance rack cardigan. Most people respond to public embarrassment with humility. Charlene responded by forming a dictatorship on wheels. The day after her HOA trial meltdown, she declared a neighborhood emergency via paper flyer and Facebook post written entirely in capital letters. I woke up to see Tiffany taping signs to mailboxes that read, "Patriots of property, meet at the clubhouse. War has begun." I figured it was another hobby gone wrong, like her gluten-free brownies or HOA karaoke. But by noon, She'd rolled up to my driveway in her golf cart, flanked by Martha the treasurer and a man I'd never seen, wearing tactical sunglasses and a Bluetooth headset. Charlene stepped out and said, "We're here to deliver a final warning from the Preservation Council." Apparently, she'd renamed the board overnight. She handed me a packet titled Behavioral Correction Action Plan. It included things like relearn facial neutrality, remove defiant plans, and attend mandatory tone de-escalation sessions led by Martha. I asked if they'd lost their minds or just took a Groupon to totalitarianism. Tiffany, filming like it was a hostage documentary, whispered, "Don't antagonize the council." Charlie squinted and said, "Sir, you did, when you planted those cucumbers with intent to destabilize." At that point, I wasn't even mad. I was just impressed she'd weaponized vegetables into political rhetoric. But then it got real. Charlene announced they'd filed a formal complaint to the Judicial Conduct Commission, accusing me of federal intimidation, community incitement, and verbal terrorism through sarcasm. That last one made me snort audibly. They had a notarized letter signed by Gerald, the HOA secretary/husband, who looked like he hadn't slept since Y2K. I could see his hands shaking. He couldn't even meet my eyes. That's when I knew something deeper was brewing. Charlene wasn't running a board anymore. She was running a regime fueled by fear, falsified minutes, and bad PowerPoints. And the damage? It was already spreading. Neighbors began crossing the street when I walked by. The grocery clerk stopped making small talk. One guy even turned his hose on me, accidentally. Charlene had poisoned the community well with lies and sparkle pens. But I wasn't going down like the last guy who challenged her. When someone's HOA starts looking like a fan club for North Korea, it's time to stop playing defense. I didn't just need receipts. I needed reinforcements. So who breaks first, Charlene, the council, or the quiet husband with trembling hands and a secret to tell? And you won't believe who it is. I thought the HOA was dead. Turns out it just got broadband. Charlene Crawley, stripped of her HOA crown, exposed on live-streamed projector slides, and walked out of the community center to slow claps and foreclosure forms, should have vanished into Pinterest shame. Instead, she rebranded. 1 week later, she launched a podcast called Home Wreckers and Heroes, subtitled The Real Story of HOA Tyranny, starring me. Episode 1, How I Survived Suburban Sabotage with Nothing But a Clipboard and Courage. Her thumbnail featured her wrapped in the American flag, holding a gardening glove like it was the Constitution. The opening line, "I was betrayed by democracy and defeated by cucumbers." By episode 3, she was booking HOA Karens from across the country like it was a support group for delusional dictators. They shared stories about porch furniture violence and aggressive garden gnomes. It might have been funny if it hadn't worked. Her audience exploded. Facebook groups popped up. Justice for Charlene trended in 3 counties. That's when I received a cease and desist letter accusing me of unauthorized storytelling and emotional defamation. Tiffany hand-delivered it, now calling herself Charlene's Director of Narrative Correction. The letter ended with, "You have been warned. Your truth-telling is terroristic in tone." So I did the only reasonable thing. I uploaded a 32-minute expose to YouTube, narrated entirely by Alexa. Title, Hall of Atrocities. Each segment featured dramatic reenactments of HOA insanity, from illegal mailbox measurements to shade displacement citations. I used charts, audio clips, and Alexa's monotone voice reading actual violation notices like resident Gregory did permit a gust of wind to alter the approved mulch pattern. The internet lost it. Comments poured in. News outlets picked it up. One guy from Iowa wrote, "Our HOA once fined me for unpatriotic fence vibes. Thank you for this masterpiece." And then it happened. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact started speaking up. Not just in my community, but from others too. One woman told me Charlene destroyed her marriage over unsanctioned wind chimes. A man in Lot 12 had to refinance after being fined into oblivion. Someone tearfully confessed that Charlene had deported their cat, filing it under non-compliant pet residency. Turns out, Queen Beige had been ruling like a khaki dictator for over a decade, and no one had ever dared say it out loud. But once one story cracks loose, the rest avalanche down. Because that's the thing, HOA monsters don't need claws, just silence. And we fed her for years with ours. The only real pest control is speaking up. And knowing that community means everybody has a voice, not just the one holding the megaphone. The HOA may be dead, but the deed isn't. So, who really owns this place now? Get ready for the final surprise of Circle of Curiosity. And trust me, it's poetic. Some people inherit gold. I inherited a zoning loophole, and accidentally became a legend with a lawn. It started with a box of railroad maps from a local history fair. I was just trying to avoid another HOA flash mob, and maybe grab a churro. But inside that box, under layers of brittle parchment and passive-aggressive museum labels, I found a land survey dated 1912. Turns out, a railroad company misfiled a grant boundary, and my modest home, mailbox, and aggressive cucumbers sat on land that technically included the HOA clubhouse, not adjacent. Not bordering, included. I brought it to Marla at the county clerk's office, and she said the 6 words that make grown men cry tears of real estate joy. You might legally own their building. I waited exactly 2 days before dropping a $1.00 bid at the county auction for the abandoned lot number in question. Apparently, it had defaulted on taxes back in 1998 and slipped through the bureaucratic cracks like a gluten-free cracker and soup. No one noticed, because no one thought to check under the clubhouse. But I did, and with that $1.00, I didn't just buy a patch of grass, poetic justice served warm with a side of mortgage-free satisfaction. I walked into the HOA board's emergency meeting, smiled, and said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to evacuate my building." The clubhouse was evicted by sundown. Gerald wept softly while rolling up a community bingo banner. Martha tried to take the potted ferns. Tiffany live-streamed the drama under the title HOA Apocalypse, Day 91. I didn't turn the building into a house. I turned it into something better, a free community center. We offered legal aid, budgeting classes, and a wildly popular seminar called How to Spot a Sociopathic Administrator Before She Weaponizes a Clipboard. For the first time, Ranch Rock Court felt like a neighborhood, not a suburban Hunger Games with mulch rules. Then the final letter came, postmarked from the Women's Correctional Facility and scented with desperation. I opened it, expecting a final jab. What I got was a confession, or maybe a marketing pitch. Charlene had started an inmate-run HOA and was teaching classes on how to file noise complaints in solitary. She wrote, "They actually listen here. I've never felt more powerful." Part of me laughed. Part of me shuddered. All of me forwarded the letter to the prison warden with a sticky note that said, "Good luck." Looking back, it wasn't the bylaws or even the lawsuits that made this story worth telling. It was the quiet revolution. The moment folks realized that fear dressed in khakis can only rule if no one laughs at it, or questions it, or files a zoning appeal. I didn't fight the HOA with fists or fury. I fought it with facts, humor, and one very sassy copy of the Texas Property Code. That's what changed everything. Because the biggest lesson of all, power built on fear collapses when someone finally stands up and brings snacks. So if this story made you laugh or reminded you of your own clipboard-carrying nemesis, hit that like button. If you've ever been fined for the crime of existing creatively, drop your HOA horror story in the comments. And if you believe that laughter, community, and good legal research can take down any petty tyrant, subscribe, because the next story might just be yours. This was Circle of Curiosity, and remember, the next time someone says, "Sir, you're violating Section 3.5 of the Lawn Decorum Mandate," smile, sip your coffee, and check the deed. You might own the whole street.